It's sort of an admission or a revelation, not a revelation like, oh, but a revelation like, oh my gosh, this is something that happened for me in the past couple of months. So during the month of August, I lost it. I just lost it. And what I mean by it is my sense of personal peace and power and the awareness that I am spirit itself, making my way in the world, all that good stuff we talk about all the time here and that we teach and that I teach. I just lost all that. And I became very anxious and thrown by a work situation, and I just really lost my perspective. So even though, hello? See, I can't even get to the forest. So normally, yes, in the forest, life is good, sun is shining, it's all good. But I came right up against a big fat old sequoia tree of something. But I didn't even look nearly as happy as her. I couldn't find a sequoia tree picture like that with a person below it where they looked unhappy. So I guess this will have to do. But I didn't look as happy as her, but man, that tree was in my face, and I wasn't able to see the beautiful forest behind me. So I looked more like this. Kind of pathetic, somebody please help me. At times I looked like this. I sort of put on my helmet and went out there and made my way in the world, but it was like, hanging on with my fingernails to keep my composure. But ultimately, the good news is that by the end of the month, the project had passed, but more importantly, I got back to my center, because of course we know it's not about the project, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. I did get to the good news, which is back to my usual perky and gorgeous and spiritual self. So what I want to talk about today is this idea that we can sometimes come up against it. And I know I'm not alone in this. I talk to you, you come for treatment. I know that we often come up against stuff. As spiritual as we are, as centered as we can be, sometimes something just kind of gets the better of us. It gets our attention in a way that it's difficult to return to that center of peace and power. In fact, last week, a member of our congregation mentioned to me that he's here on Sundays, he gets all filled up with all this great stuff, and then sometimes by midweek, he's kind of losing the big picture. He's not feeling like he's in the forest. He's feeling a little bit more like he's in the trees. Or stuck on a tree. So when we go back to the daily circumstances of our lives, sometimes, our finances, our kids, our jobs, all kinds of things can interrupt that sense of flow and peace. Anyone else in here able to identify with that? Yeah. Good. I was thinking, this congregation looks pretty good. Maybe they're not going to relate to this. And then I thought, nah, they'll get it. And this issue, this anxiety and stress, is really rampant in our society, right? And we have our own community here, we have our own center, but we do live in this society. And this society has got some stressors going on, wouldn't you say? According to a global news story, April 16th of this year, they were kind of likening this to sort of an epidemic, this amount of stress and anxiety that we're experiencing. They talked about, it's got a life of its own. They talked about that there was some Statistics Canada report, a report that said the following. 23% of Canadians who are 15 years of age or older said most days they experience quite a bit or that they're under extreme stress. So 23%, almost a quarter of Canadians 15 years of age or older said most days are quite a bit or extremely stressful. And that number rises to 30% among the 35 to 54 age group. 1 in 4 Canadians cite stress as the reason for leaving their job. 73% of all working adults aged 20 to 64 report at least some stress in their lives. And according to the Mental Health Association, 1 in 5 Canadians will personally experience a mental health problem or illness, and 8% of adults will experience a major depression at some time in their lives. And suicide as well, we know it's in the media more and more often, accounts for 24% of all deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds and 16% among 25 to 44-year-olds. Work is the leading cause of stress that people cited in this survey. But the addition of new current concerns like terrorism and the state of the environment are also adding to the load. Now, I am not affirming this is the truth about us. I am only saying that this is the kind of environment that we're in. And so if we sometimes get caught up in this, it would be understandable. So I want for us to know that if we are facing some stuff, it's okay. Even though we have this teaching, we have all these wonderful tools that we use, that we ought to give ourselves permission that when we're in the stuff, we're just in the stuff. And so let's be kind to ourselves and let's not be thinking we have to, look like this every minute. And you may be thinking this doesn't really apply in our community because we have these great tools. But I know that we do come up with it, up to something from time to time. And so we use our great tools, and what I'm going to talk about today is actually, most of it's a reminder of some of the great tools that we have and that we use when we do come up against those challenging things that make it difficult for us to look around and see the truth of us in that moment. So why is it important to deal with this? Why not just deal with one issue after another? Why not just suffer through? Life is tough, just grin and bear it. That old expression, life is something and then you die, right? Why not just struggle through? Well, most of us here have a bigger vision than that, don't we? We're not in the camp of life is tough and, it's just one more thing and I can soldier through. We know that there is something greater. We know that we are powerful beings and that we can live lives of joy and meaning most of the time. And when we come up against stuff, we find ways to work our way out of it. We know that, just as our mission and vision statement talk about, we know that there is the possibility, that there is the reality, that we are creating a world that works for everyone. And that creation starts with us, doesn't it? It starts with our individual lives. That as we live our lives in peaceful and powerful ways, we change the planet. We change the world. And it's important because when we're hanging on like that little cat, or putting our helmets on and getting out there and being tough, we don't have much room to make good choices or to remember who we are. When we're stuck in just delivering, just getting past it, just working through the pain, we don't pause long enough to let the healing and let the new stuff come in. Does that make sense? Yeah. The Dalai Lama said, a sense of contentment is crucial to being happy. Physical health, material wealth, and friends contribute to this, but contentment governs our relationships with them all. So we deserve to be happy and content, don't we? Ernest Holmes also said, life is not just something to be endured. It is to be lived in joy, in a fullness without limit. I love that. So what can we do about it? How can we deal with our stress or anxiety we may be feeling and cultivate contentment with our lives? We can let Spirit, God, the universal intelligence, support us. And some days that's easy for me. Some days I'm a little anxious, I do a spiritual mind treatment, and man, I'm there. But during August, I was struggling to do spiritual mind treatment. I couldn't sit down to meditate for 2 minutes. It was a struggle. So I'm going to talk about some other measures we can do that complement and that are ways to get ourselves moving and get ourselves back into that place of being able to treat and do the things we need to do. And be clear, I'm not trying to make you better or fix you in any way, because we know from this teaching and we know ourselves, we don't need fixing. There's nothing wrong with us to start with. What we are experiencing are the temporary flows and shifts and changes in life, but there's nothing about us that is not already whole, complete, and perfect. So I really believe that it's important that we find these ways, that we keep using methods so that we remember our personal power, our spiritual power. Ernest Holmes said, you already are a spiritual being. When the mind understands this and embodies its essence, that which you are in the invisible will become more apparent in the visible. And I bet everyone in here has had experiences of that, where what you are in the invisible, there are times, many times in our lives, when that is fully showing to the outside. We're in that zone. We're being that powerful person we want to be on the outside. We're giving in our work. We're giving in our relationships. We're feeling like we're satisfied and making a contribution. So what we are in the invisible becomes visible. So I have a few ideas I want to share with you today that worked for me in August to help me get back to my recognition of my spiritual beingness. And remember that help and support comes from everywhere. So what I'm going to talk about today may be something you latch onto and think, yeah, that would really be something I want to try, or I can see how that would work. Maybe you do some other things that work for you. So go with the tried and true. Go with the things that you know work for you. And I'm just going to share these ideas with you today. First one is to know that our feelings are not the truth of us. They're temporary. Our feelings come and go based on what? Based on our thinking, exactly. Based on what we think. In the September issue of Science of Mind magazine, there's a man named Timber Hawkeye. He wrote a best-selling book called Buddhist Boot Camp. And he describes a workshop he was at where the facilitator had the group conjure up a very sad moment in their lives, the saddest moment in their lives. Maybe it was a death, maybe it was something very sad. And he asked them to remember that in detail. Who were they with? What were they wearing? What was the circumstance? They actually had a video camera in the room to do this experiment. And as people began to remember, the video camera captured them slumping. It captured people getting tears in their eyes, some people rocking back and forth. And it looked as though they were not just remembering, but they were going through the emotions again. Then the facilitator switched it up and asked them to remember something happy. Birth of a child, your wedding day, something, falling in love, something very happy. And again, the video camera captured the reaction of the group. Their posture straightened, people were smiling, some began to giggle. And like the first experience, it was like they were living the experience again. So what's the point? The point is, those individuals were in complete control of their emotions. By changing their thinking, the emotion changed. The body language changed, the emotion shifted. And this is one of the major promises of this teaching, isn't it? We're not our feelings. We are not our circumstances or our memories. We can and we do change our emotions, our way of being in the world, by changing our thinking. At some point in my distress during August, I realized it wasn't the project. The project was incidental. The event is always neutral, right? The project was neutral. The project didn't have my number. I had my number. My coworkers weren't stressed. My supervisor, who had actually more responsibility for the success of this project, he was fine. I was the one going, ah, ah, ah. So it was clear to me that I was forgetting my own power. It was my own thinking that was causing my distress, not something from outside of me. Ernest Holmes said, man, or women, this is a language that he used, man by thinking can bring into his or her experience whatever we desire, if we think correctly and become a living embodiment of our thoughts. This is not done by holding thoughts, but by knowing the truth. Now, I am not suggesting that it's unnatural or negative to feel sad, angry, overjoyed, to have a full range of emotions. This is not about denying our emotions. I'm talking about avoiding the belief that we are powerless over our emotions, or that someone or something outside of us has the power to make us feel a certain way. So I'm all about feeling our emotions. I'm not saying suppress them. In fact, I think suppressing them is part of what makes us unhealthy. So acknowledging difficult feelings can actually help us move through it. When I work with a psychologist some of the time, I went to see the psychologist, and we got to the bottom of my feelings about that project were about perfectionism. It wasn't the project, it was that I am very afraid to get it wrong. So I work all the time on remembering that I am whole, complete, and perfect, that I'm already perfect, while I avoid perfectionism. You get the difference? You know, that feeling of, oh man, it's like the sky is going to fall, something's going to implode if I don't get it correct. So I'm trying to remember I'm perfect without trying to be perfectly correct. So we want to feel our feelings, and we want to respect them, and we want to then move into our thinking, rational mind where we can move ourselves to a place where we can make better choices. Another simple way to say this, Neil Donald Walsh said, remember, thought creates reality. So if you've created a reality you don't like, don't give it a second thought. The second idea I have for you today is it's okay to talk about these things. Sometimes we suit up, we show up here at the center or other places in our lives. We suit up, we show up, and we think we're supposed to just kind of look good. How are you? I'm fine. And sometimes you're talking to somebody and you're thinking, that fine has about as much sincerity as I don't know what, but you don't look fine to me. So what I did during this time was somewhere in the middle of it, I decided I didn't really make a conscious decision about it. I just started to get a bit more honest. So a coworker would say to me, how are you? And I started saying, you know what, I've been feeling anxious. I'm working on this project and I'm really feeling kind of anxious. Well, I had a whole other different kind of conversation with people. People would say to me too. I've been dealing with this or I've been dealing with that. So I got to move out of feeling like I'm the only one that's experiencing this and there's something bad about this and I shouldn't be revealing that this happens for me, that I should just look good. In fact, it was a bit of a risk for me today to think, do I want to be quite this open? I'm supposed to be the minister here, aren't I supposed to have this all together? And then I thought, no. What I know works is when I can be willing to be myself, to be authentic, to be honest, to say, you know what, I'm having some challenges. And man, that really made a difference. I got to feel supported, I got to feel affirmed, and not that I wish it on anybody else, but it was very comforting to know I wasn't the only one that was having some challenges. So we want to share in that human experience of navigating circumstances and managing feelings and changing and growing together. Yeah, we're kind of pack animals. We want that. We're here together, not just home listening to Super Sunday, because we want to be in community. We want to know that we're in this together. So we're going to remember we're not our feelings. Second thing is we can talk about this. And the third area that I want to talk about today is that there is such wisdom to be gained and such comfort to be gained from listening and reading. So how many of you here have favorite books or favorite tapes or things you read or listen to that can bring you out of that stuff you're in and can help you remember the power of who you are? So, and at my very worst during this time, this was comforting. I didn't know if you guys would find this funny, but I read this on Twitter one morning and I was in such a bad shape that I thought, oh, oh, good. I'm not as, bad at this as I thought. I'm not going to get fired next week. I'm not the worst person ever. So, but let's elevate from that. But in that moment, this was good enough to get me at least shifted a tiny little bit. So we want to use words and tapes and reading or listening to others to bring ourselves up to that place where we feel comforted but we're inspired. So we listen to Pat on Sundays. I always walk away with lots of stuff. We listen to the music on Sundays. I often feel so much better after a song and some lyrics when I've been listening and expressing that. There are teachers everywhere. They're on the net. They're in our own families. Sometimes kids says something and I think, oh my God, that was so profound. Our workplaces, other professionals, there are teachers and there is wisdom absolutely everywhere. So who do you find inspiring? Who speaks or writes in a way that connects with you? So I encourage you to keep using those spiritual teachers. For me, Raymond Charles Barker is a great comfort. How many of you have read Barker? Barker's written a number of books. One of them is Treat Yourself to Life. I love that book. That book has gotten me through some white-knuckle moments and through some of those 4 o'clock in the morning. I know when that book is prominent on my bedside table, I got stuff going on. So I pull it out and I read it, and it really helps me to shift my thinking. So during this time, I read from Raymond Charles Barker, I'm not afraid. And I was in big fear, big performance anxiety. During this time I read, I'm not afraid of any situation, person, place, or thing. Therefore, I now declare that in the midst of me is the power and the presence of God sufficient unto every situation. I rise up in the dignity and integrity of myself as a spiritual being, and I know that the power that supports this universe supports me, and I allow it to do just that. Right? I read it over and over again. But those kinds of words really connected for me and helped me to get myself into that different place. So sometimes the words are for comfort, sometimes they're inspiration, and sometimes they're both. And we calm down enough. I was able to calm down enough to reawaken my consciousness, to do my other spiritual practices. Another passage that I read then, and I still read now regularly, is this one from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, at the end of the day, I read this, finish every day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some burdens and some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as fast as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. You shall begin it well and serenely, and with too high a spirit to be encumbered with your old nonsense. Isn't that great? You know, not to be hard on myself, but just to say, you know what, so much of that stuff I'm doing to myself, it's just nonsense. I don't have to be there anymore. And we can become great spiritual teachers, but we can also become inspired or re-inspired by everyday people. You know, we talk about how difficult and challenging social media can be, Twitter, Instagram, all those things we look at. And I know, I follow Trump. What am I thinking? In fact, maybe I'll go home and delete that. But, so I do that, and sometimes it's destructive. But there are also a lot of fabulous things on the internet and in Instagram and Twitter, and wherever platforms you're using, where we can find inspiration. So I really try now, and I'm weeding through, and I'm skipping over the news items that, you know, are just bringing me down, and I go to some like this. I found this one, and in the middle of what I was going through, this was so really powerful for me. And I don't know if you can read it from there. It's a woman who's rowing, and you can see the two pictures. And the first one is, I did it. I bloody did it. I rowed through all 6 cycles of chemo. At the beginning, no one could predict how I'd manage. My oncologist predicted extra fatigue because of my history of ME. I don't even know what ME is. It wasn't easy. The second pic shows the end of an outing, but I'm pleased as punch I did it. And something just struck me. This woman's name is Patricia Carswell. I don't know who she is, but I just thought, she's just like an everyday hero, right? There are people among us every day that are going through stuff, and they are doing it with grace and with courage. And I just took such inspiration from her story. So we can find those stories everywhere. They may be people we're in contact with. They may be people in our families. They may even be remembering something we did in the past that was inspiring to ourselves. So look for the inspiration. Let it fill you up and let it change you. Also with this idea of listening, don't forget to listen to yourself. So ask yourself what's really going on. You know, when I worked with a psychologist, I got insight into what I was going through, why I was acting the way I was acting. So listen, you have wisdom within yourself. Try and take those moments. Try to get a little bit quiet. Try to go inside a bit and just say, okay, Marjorie or Ron, picking on you, Ron, what's going on? What's really going on here? Where's the forest? This is the tree. Where's the forest? Michael Beckwith said, our societal conditioning has convinced us we must excel, improve, upgrade, make over ourselves, and never simply rest in our essential ground of being. Resist! And Michael Beckwith also said, self-acceptance is the greatest discipline we will ever know. Isn't that great? Self-acceptance is the greatest discipline we will ever know. That deep awareness and the willingness to keep going back to that ground of that we are our own true north. We are our own wisdom. We have everything we need right now. So really allowing ourselves to listen to that self and accept where we are in the moment and allow ourselves to be then pulled forward. So the good news is I was actually able to do some of that partway through the month, starting to get some self-acceptance, starting to be more disciplined about my thoughts. And finally, certainly last but not least, do not forget, I want to reveal that for a second, don't forget to practice affirmative prayer. And I'm giving this less time in the talk, but it's because we do it all the time and we talk about it all the time. So don't forget. So during this month, while I was struggling, I was also doing affirmative prayer. So sometimes very effectively, my spiritual mind treatments were bang on. Other times they were like, I'm not quite there, but I'm still going to do this because I know how valuable and how important it is for me. So I've used prayer all my life, as many of you probably have. And I remember as a little girl, when I would be stressed at night or I'd wake up, I'd go up and I'd go to my mom, and she'd comfort me, and then she'd say, go back to bed and say your prayers. So there were times, this is me on my first communion. Beautiful downtown Drumheller. Aren't I cute? I remember those slingback shoes. Oh my God, they were like the best thing ever. So I've been praying since I was a little girl. My prayer has changed, but the practice of praying has not. So this idea that we want to do spiritual mind treatment, we want to remind ourselves, we want to go to that highest possible place. So it used to be, back when I was a little girl there, it was, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now at the hour of our death. And now it's, I know that I'm a peaceful, powerful being, that there is one spirit, one life, one energy that is everywhere present, that is filling me up at this very moment. Because I know I am this energy, I know that anything I want to accomplish in my life, including this sequoia tree of my workplace, is nothing. It's nothing in the face of this peaceful power that I am. I give thanks for this, and I release it into a universe that supports me in every moment. That was a spiritual mind treatment. It's as simple as that. It's remembering there is one life. It supports us. Everything we want to do is absolutely possible. We give thanks for it, and we let it go. Thank you. So my very last words. In conclusion, when you're stuck in the trees, hang in there when you need to. Remember you are more powerful than your feelings. Listen and allow yourself to be inspired. Remember to affirmatively pray yourself into the life you want to experience. And if you do these things, I can pretty much guarantee, call me if it doesn't work, I can pretty much guarantee you'll be moved from behind the tree and back into your forest of living a life of joy and meaning, however you define that for yourself. You'll be paying attention again to what is most important to you and remembering that you have all the peace, the power, everything you need to accomplish all of it. Amy started out by singing, we can have everything we want. Well, yeah, we can. And it all starts with our thinking and our willingness to be present for ourselves and to move ourselves forward. So, good job on all of you. Go out there, be well.